Hey, this is Terratoots with a quick tutorial on creating a sandstone slot canyon in Terragen 4, like something you might find in the southwest of the United States. This is a little bit more complex scene from a node standpoint, so rather than create the entire scene from scratch, we're going to start with the finished scene and step through each node, highlighting the parts that are really contributing to the final effect. I'll put a link to the finished scene in the description if you'd like to spend some more time looking at the specific numbers in each setting. We'll start out with just a long, narrow slit in the ground. This is created with a simple shape shader, stretched out and set to apply some negative displacement. Notice that the smooth step edge profile is used, together with some edge width, to soften the edge. This is always really important when you're planning to do sideways displacement later. Next, we want some curve to the canyon shape, so it isn't just straight. We'll do this with a large power fractal, and spike limit are low, so we get a smooth flowing displacement. We'll repeat this displacement at a smaller amplitude. We'll repeat this displacement at a smaller scale and reduced amplitude to add some more waves to the canyon walls. And if we come down into the canyon, we can see some nice shapes starting to appear. The next thing we'll do is add in some large divots or channels in the walls to make it look like water has been flowing across the sandstone. We'll do this with another power fractal set to a medium negative displacement and Perlin ridges noise. A key here is that we're going to stretch the power fractal in the X and Z directions. This is going to give us these long horizontal bands running across the rock face. We'll keep the smallest scale relatively large, so we keep our nice flowing shape. To add some more variation, we'll follow up with some medium scale ridges. Notice that the actual fractal sizes are similar to the large divots, but we're not stretching horizontally as much, so we'll see more vertical features start to appear. These ridges are set to use a small positive displacement, so they stick out from the wall instead of cutting in. And they're set to use lateral displacement only, so we only get sideways movement. Next, we'll come back with more divots, this time at a much smaller scale. These are created using another stretched power fractal and are going to start giving us these fine lines across the surface of the wall and start producing a look that's a little more like sandstone. Notice that these only use a 3 centimeter negative displacement, so it's much less than the large divots. For good measure, we'll add one more set at an even smaller scale with just 8 millimeters of displacement. These are getting small enough that you won't be able to see them unless the camera is pretty close to the wall, but they add some nice detail for close-ups. What we'll do next is close in the top of the canyon to create a much tighter, more enclosed space. I'm doing this with a surface layer, using a displacement offset along the surface normal. The key, though, is that there's also an altitude constraint, with the minimum altitude set to the bottom of the canyon floor, and a fuzzy zone to approximately the depth of the canyon. These are using final position, and if we turn on the test color for this layer, you can see the effect it creates, where the surface shader applies to the top of the canyon more strongly, creating a stronger displacement, and then less and less as you come down to the bottom. This counteracts the smooth step of our starting simple shape shader. We finish off the geometry with some really fine noise that's not stretched. The idea was just to give this surface some roughness like sandstone. Again, you can't really see this unless you're close to the wall, so it can be turned off for farther away shots to save on render time. Okay, moving on to color. We start out with a base layer of orange at full coverage, and then layer on some soft, dark patches at a fairly large scale with a high roughness. A negative color offset keeps the patches from appearing as often, And this distribution shader uses a minimum slope constraint to limit them to the canyon walls. Finally, we'll apply some light pink horizontal stripes using another horizontally stretched power fractal. These will give us our iconic strata look. Now, you'll notice that the canyon floor ended up looking a little strange after all that displacement. In this scene, we're just going to cover that up using a large flat plane object. To make it look more like sand, I've added a few nodes to the plane's internal network. If we come in here, we can see that the base color is set to a pinkish orange. And there are a couple of power fractals attached to give some color variation. The first creates some large orange areas using purlin billows. The second adds some really small scale tannish color variation to try and get more of a sandy texture. What really sells the sand look, though, is this purlin ridges power fractal attached to the displacement function, giving us some nice little mini sand dunes. And essentially that's it. For a final touch, I've added in an overcast sky for some nice diffuse lighting, and pumped up the atmospheric haze for a hot, dusty desert look. But at this point, we have a fairly decent looking desert slot canyon, ready for the next flash flood to arrive.